Hello, I'm going to speak to you about Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and what I'm going to do is introduce you to a model of participation that I developed over a decade ago under the heading of Voice is Not Enough, because in English the voice of the child is the term that is used most often when describing Article 12, and I came to the conclusion that that terminology, voice of the child, was problematic. So you should be familiar with the text of Article 12, and if you read it, you will see that it is quite a complicated text. It's a little bit convoluted, and whenever you read UN Human Rights Treaty provisions that are like that, it's usually a good sign that they have been controversial, that the states parties who were negotiating didn't agree and they were chopping and changing bits of text. And that most definitely happened with Article 12 because it is one of the most contentious provisions in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and in fact is considered to be the main reason that the United States has not ratified the Convention, because some people are concerned about interference with parental rights. So what's its significance? It has been described as the cornerstone of the Convention, the most important and innovative principle. Professor Michael Freeman said that its significance is that it recognizes the child as a full human being with integrity and personality and the ability to participate freely in society. And that makes it a very significant and very innovative concept. It's also not just a right, it is one of the 4 general principles. It's a right in itself, it's a means of interpreting other rights, but I would suggest that it's also a barometer for children's rights more generally. And what I mean by that is that our research shows that in societies where there is a high degree of respect for children's views, there's generally a high degree of respect for children's rights. So for example, that comes about because children don't usually want you to act in ways that breach their rights. Think of, for example, the use of physical punishment. Children knew that was a breach of their right to equality and dignity long before many adults realized that it was as well. So for me, the personal journey, this is a little bit of Robert Frost, who's an American poet, and he has a very famous poem where he says, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that made the difference. So this was me in my journey. I'm a lawyer by training. I was an academic lawyer in a law school, and I conducted a study for our very first Children's Commissioner on children's rights. And in that study, I was told I had to talk to children, and I said I would, but I didn't really think why I should. I thought it wasn't a particularly good use of my time. So I got my 3 researchers to talk to the children, and I did the interviews with the adults. And then that changed everything. What happened was that the data from this study came back to us, and what was happening was that adults were telling me that they did the voice of the child, but children were telling my researchers that no one was listening to them, no one was taking them seriously. And this is one of the pieces of data that we collected from children. It's called a boy not getting a say in a conversation. The mother is saying, you shouldn't be telling me what to do. And the boy is saying, I was just telling you what I think. And this became a theme in the findings, that when children try to express themselves, adults interpret that they're being cheeky or challenging authority, as opposed to just trying to get their point of view across. And for me, this became a turning point in my academic career, where I realized actually this right, Article 12, that I was a bit dismissive about, was actually the most significant right in terms of realization and empowerment of children in their own rights. And what I concluded then was that the terminology that was used was really unsatisfactory, that it wasn't the voice of the child, it wasn't the right to be heard or even the right to participate. And I wrote an article which said that basically all of these terms are a very convenient shorthand to help avoid this long-winded and awkward construction of this article. But actually they're dangerous because every one of them has the potential to diminish its impact as they convey an imperfect and inaccurate summary of what this provision is about. And I concluded voice was not enough, and actually what we need is 4 concepts to capture it: space, voice, audience, and influence. Very briefly, these concepts are as follows. Space is the idea that children must be given the opportunity to express a view. The space must be safe and inclusive. Voice is still there. Children must be facilitated to express their views, and that also means in terms of helping them to form an opinion. But this is the new bit. It's not just enough to have children expressing their views. Something has to happen to those views. And from a human rights perspective, we look for the duty bearer, and the duty bearer has to act. The duty bearer has to listen to the views. There must be an audience. And to me, that audience has to be the person with the power to effect change. This is not counselling, okay? And finally, there must be influence. The view must be acted upon as appropriate in terms of the children's age and maturity. So why do people find it useful? Sometimes when you're an academic scholar, you write a paper and you maybe get 10 citations, or you maybe get 20 downloads, and sometimes you think, was that my mother, you know? Was it actually, is anybody reading it? And this is not that paper. This paper went the academic equivalent of viral. It is the most cited paper on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It appeals to people. It appeals, and these are the things that people find useful, that I was very clear that listening to children is not an option which is in the gift of adults. It's the legal obligation, which is the right of the child. Secondly, that it is a right, not a duty. Children shouldn't be forced to speak. If they don't want to speak, that's okay. Thirdly, because of this focus and emphasis on influence, which was being neglected, lawyers, teachers, and social workers told me in interviews they were listening to children, but they weren't actually taking their views seriously and doing something with it. The appeal of my model is that it's not hierarchical. I don't say that something that is child-led is better than something that is adult-led. What's really important in child participation is there's no one right way. It depends on the child, the decision, the context, and sometimes letting a child take a decision for themselves is a breach of their rights. It just depends. And finally, the model appeals because it demonstrates the interrelationship between Article 12 and other rights. And you as human rights students know that all rights are interrelated and interdependent and indivisible. Article 12 is also like that. So we need to know children are safe, that there's non-discrimination, there's equality, that children have a right to information, which is crucial. This is a right that is at the centre and hub of all other children's rights. Thank you for listening. Sishin.